wasn't posted on the website?
That would be the audit, and there are paper copies here today.
Okay.
And we can go anytime you're ready, Rick.
All right. With that, I will call the Railroad Transportation Safety District meeting for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021 to order. Would you please call the roll?
Yes, present.
Present.
Yes.
Present.
Very good. I'll read the Notice of Open Meetings Act. This City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Railroad Transportation Safety District, commonly referred to as the RTSD, is subject to and adheres to the Nebraska Open Meetings Act. A copy of the Open Meetings Act is available for inspection and is posted by the entrance to this room. The RTSD agenda and the materials that are being considered at today's meeting were posted on RTSD website on August 31st, 2021. The RTSD website is also accessible by links from both the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County official government sites. In addition, a copy of the agenda is also available at the entrance to this room. One copy of the meeting agenda and the materials being considered today are located at the dais, and complete copies of these materials are on file at the RTSD office at 949 West Bond Street, Suite 200. Finally, in accordance with Nebraska law, notice of the location and time of this meeting, together with a summary of the proposed budget statement, was published in the Lincoln Journal-Star newspaper on August 31st, 2021. With that, the next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
I have a minor correction for the minutes. On page 3 of the minutes, order number 21-09, the consideration of the levy request, there is an error in the typed levy to be set. It says .02217, and what the board did approve was .022217. So, and that's the levy request that went to the county board. That is the levy request that was approved by the county board and sent back. So for your consideration would be to add that correction to the minutes.
Is it appropriate to add that?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second with the correction noted by Roger to approve the minutes. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item number 4 is the report of statement of financial activity. Mr. Rhodey will present.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Ron Rhodey from the Lancaster County Budget and Fiscal Office, and we support the RTSD and their accounting endeavors. And our financials today are through August 20th, 2021. Just to note, I think it's important to note that represents 13.7% of the year complete, so keep that percentage in mind as we progress through these financials. The RTSD does operate on a fiscal year. It's the same as the Lancaster County, which runs July 1 through June 30th of every year. So as of August 20th, we were 13.7% complete for the fiscal year. And so please, again, keep that in mind. We'll also break this up into 3 sections, as you see on the overhead or on your papers in front of you. The first section is the receipts, the second section is disbursements, and the final section, the third, is cash and investments. So we'll start off with the receipts, and receipts through August 20th. And again, we cut that off for financial purposes. August 20th, it gives us time to put this all into a good readable format for you folks. That's why we choose that date. Receipts, tax receipts were $1,358,217, or 22.6% of the budget collected. The investment interest income was $5,935, which represented 7.4% of the budget. Overall receipts were $1,364,152, which is 22.4% collected through August 20th. Second section is disbursements. Under disbursements, we have commissions, refunds to state of Nebraska of $26,777, or 23.1%. Operating costs are $1,123, or 1.1% of the budget. Construction project costs were $146,814, or 9.1%. Total disbursements through that period were $174,714, which represents 9.5% of the budget. And the third and final section is the cash and investments for Rtsd. Going down to the bold section, we're ending cash balance as of August 20th of $1,655,382. The ending investment balance was $13,642,032. The total fund balance as of that period is $15,297,415. Underneath that section, you will see a breakdown of the investments and a breakdown by certificate of deposit and money market. It also has maturity dates and purchase dates and the balances in each one. So that concludes the financial statement presentation through August 20th, 2021. Any questions?
Any questions for Ron? 13.7% of the year has transpired, and we've received 22.4% of the revenue. Is that accurate, Ron?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's correct, President Best.
And we've only dispersed 9.5%, so that's kind of a good ratio to maintain.
Yes, that's why I always point that out. Thanks for also noticing that.
I try to pay attention when you're talking, Ron. I do like that. Telling you.
They always say to treat the county or wherever I work, their money as your own, and that's why the 2 things I look at as well. So
Yeah.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, that's very good.
I move approval of the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the report of statement of financial activity. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Item number 5, consideration of fiscal year 2021 audit.
Tony Dorina's here to do that. The audit was not actually online. We've got paper copies here today. We consider this a draft. Don't know that we think it'll change, but Tony,
Come on up, Tony.
you have copies? I have paper
Thank you.
Feel free to go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Tony Jarina. I work for HBE LLP, CPAs here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I want to present for you a draft of the financial statements and the audit report for the year end June 30th, 2021. First of all, I want to thank the board for letting HBE perform the audit for you this year. And the audit went very well. There were no issues with communications with the staff or anything such as that. We were able to get the audit done in a smooth fashion, so we thank you for that. And Roger and Amy and Ron, they all did a great job for us also. This is an we are presenting an unmodified audit report, which means that we have no issues to talk about other than a clean audit, as you will. So That's why we call it now unmodified. If you turn to page 3, there is a statement of net position. Basically, it's the balance sheet for government. And there was an increase in your total assets this year from $12,700,000 to about $16 million. And most of that was all an increase in cash for the year. Next on page 4 is your income statement as you would think of it. The big change for the year was the amount of construction projects going from $8.9 million last year down to about $1 million in the current year. And that made up most of the change from year to year of your net position. There was a slight decrease. There was a decrease in interest income, but most of that is because of the change in investment values and such. Other than that, everything pretty much stayed the same. Administrative services were about $61,000 for each year, in that rough area there. And most of your expenses pretty much stayed the same. Very small changes here and there. Other than that, we have other reports that follow that, and they're just a little bit different format to satisfy the Government Accounting Standards Board. So, starting on page 8 are the notes to the financial statements. They're very close to what was presented last year. Maybe someday you'd want to read them. I will leave that up to you, though. But on page 14 is the comparison of your cash basis financial statements to what you budgeted last year. You started off with about $10.1 million of cash for the year, and then you had about the same amount of resources, so there was not very much of a difference between the original budget that you passed and the total revenue that came in for the year. We're looking at $15.4 million for both of for the actual and budget, so we're very close there. Down the line, you'll see the big difference in the total charges to appropriations or expenses. Again, for budgeting purposes, the Rtsd is on a cash basis. And why we have $15.4 million of expenses budgeted, because, well, that's the state, for the Nebraska Budget Act, you cannot have more ending cash resources than your operating expenses. So we have to for budgeting purposes, we have to include a lot of capital improvements to bring that cash basis down, or that cash balance down. But, that's why we end up now for a regular ending cash amount of $14 million. As you see, the budget had a decrease of resources for the year of $34,000. Other than that, in the following pages, we have other information. We talk about the activity in the county treasurer's office with your cash. The next pages after that deals with the certificates of deposit that you have. And then the page after that is the type of insurance that you have. And then the final page that we present is a summary of the real estate tax collections for the year. And that would be on page 19. Next year's number for real estate taxes, that'll go up quite a bit because of the new rate that you're using. But other than that, I would be very happy to take any questions that you may have.
A lot of information here for
Yes, it
us
is.
to digest, Tony, but I know it looks like we have a lot of cash on hand. And I mean, we do have a significant amount of cash on hand, but that kind of pales in comparison to the obligation we've made to
Correct.
the construction
You have a
project.
big obligation on North 33rd Street or in Cornhusker, so.
And I think it's pretty well documented. We don't meet that regularly, but it's been pretty well documented that we have to get
I've-
that cash flow up pretty high, because once that process, construction starts.
Yes, and the RTSD prefers not to go out for a bond. So the only other way you're going to get those cash reserves is by real estate taxes.
Right, right, we have that, and then hopefully the contributions of other entities combined to make that project a reality. And I know, I just want to reiterate, since we've been talking about that since I came on the board in 2019, but I know there's a growing, I would, impatience is probably too strong a word, but anticipation about seeing that project go forward. That's not your area, so I don't even know why I
Yeah.
said it to you,
Well,
but.
I've heard that being talked about for almost a decade, a couple decades now with the RTSD. But that's the only way you get your revenues, so.
There you go. Yeah, that's the point of this
Yeah.
report. So, any other questions for Tony? All right, then.
Thank you
think
very much.
Now, this is a draft, and I know Roger, I think, wanted to address that.
It is a draft, and I guess just for expediency and getting things done, I do think Tony and I are comfortable. Contingent on no changes, the board could approve this draft as the final. If there are changes, we'd bring it back at the December meeting. That would allow the paperwork and stuff to move ahead and get it filed, so.
Well, contingent upon the agreement that there would be no changes, I would move approval of this audit.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve this draft based on the premise that there will be no changes, and if there are changes, they will be brought to our attention by Tony and Roger. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 6, consideration of the fiscal year 21-22 budget. Mr. Feigar.
Okay, thank you. This is the State of Nebraska General Budget Form. Looks very different than our one sheet when we list out the budget. This is a requirement, and this budget has to be filed in State Auditor's Office by September 20th. What I would tell you is this budget represents exactly the numbers in the budget that you approved in June for estimated revenue and the capital expenditures as well as operating expenditures. So in the next item, I'll go over kind of where we are and what that budget is for the next year, and we're doing well. But this is really kind of a formality. I will tell you that we need to make a correction in the budget form on page 5, I think. Yes, on page 5, and we do have, Tony has brought a corrected sheet. If you'll remember at June, in separate action, the board also approved that additional 1% budget authority if needed in the future. That requires a 75% vote of the board, and in this budget there's an error. It says there were 6 board members voting with a total of 6 of them approving. In reality, we had 4 board members here and 4 board members voted yes, so it was 100%. That's not a problem. We will correct that page and then use that as the submittal that would go to the state. So I don't really have anything else to share. These are the required state auditor forms. This is the public hearing. As President Vest indicated, the notice of the meeting and the notice overall of the general budget components were in the newspaper last week as required by state law. And with that, I'd answer any questions and request approval of this budget.
And this report is due by the end of the month, Roger?
Well, actually, the report says it's due to the auditor the 20th of September.
20th of September.
Yes,
when it's-
which is always why we have this meeting as early as we can to affirm once we actually have the valuation and the levy from the county board to get that done, yes.
All right.
Well, I would move approval,
I'll second.
With the correction,
the 6 and the 6.
With the correction.
With the
from
correction,
6 to
yeah.
4.
Yep, thank you.
from
Very
6 to
good.
4.
So we do have a motion and a second to approve the budget with the correction noted by Roger. Please call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Item number 7, report regarding current budget status.
Okay, so on the screen, this, and again, reminding ourselves that this are the financials through August 20th. We have to kind of cut things off. So it would show that we've actually spent $27,900 in the operating budget, and we spent about $146. We've made a couple more payments on 33rd and Cornhusker and a payment on the southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone. So we're right on track, and I don't really have any issues or concerns at this point with the current budget. One other comment I might make, if people listening in were, as Ron said, 13% through the year, revenues were up, expenditures down. But if we remember, the majority of the property tax receipts are received right before August 1st and then before March, because those are paid 2 years. So they don't come in equally month by month. But at any rate, we are doing well and we're on track with the budget. So I'd answer any questions that you might have about that. We don't need any action or approval
Okay.
unless you've got
This is
questions.
just an update then. And obviously, Rogers does a great job of being available anytime that members of the board or public have questions or comments, so. All right, seeing no questions, we'll move on to item number 8, report of project and crossing updates.
Okay, Chris Humphrey, our project manager for 33rd and Cornhusker, is here. I am happy to report that the RTSD, thanks to work with WSP and Rick, we were able to initiate and secure an engineering agreement with WSP for Chris to continue the services as project manager for 33rd and Cornhusker. And that work is going well, and I'm glad to have her to be able to continue. So with that, I'll give her the floor to give us a quick update.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Roger and the board, for allowing me the opportunity to stay on and be involved with this project. Like Roger said, I'll be involved with the same capacity and the same commitment in moving this project forward and seeing it to fruition. So we don't necessarily have a lot going on right now. We're still continuing coordination with utility companies, and we are also still coordinating with the Nebraska Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration, buttoning up some environmental issues that we're working through still. Once we get to the point where NDOT and FHWA is satisfied with those environmental commitments, then we'll move forward with the draft ENA submittal, and that'll basically begin the series of reviews, draft reviews internally, first through the RTSD, then through the Nebraska Department of Transportation and Federal Highway Administration. And then once everybody's satisfied, we'll have the public hearing. Right now, that's currently scheduled for spring of next year. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So the public hearing spring of next year will be the last step in the approval process, Chris, or where does that kind of put us in the line of events?
Yeah, so we'll have the public hearing and then take public response from that. So that's a formal public hearing, a little bit more involved than we'd have as a normal public open house that I think a lot of times that we have around here. So there will be formal comments that we will accept during that time, both written and oral. and then we will respond to all of those comments. Once those comments are responded to appropriately, then we'll begin the process of kind of the final environmental document. And so that takes about a year after the public hearing to finalize all that and have a final commitment to the environmental document. And then the next step after that is moving into final design, and then we can begin the right-of-way process, acquisitions, followed up by utility relocations and construction of the project.
Okay, so public hearing next spring, about 1 year process to get the final environmental document done,
Correct.
and then we'll.
Then we can begin on final design. So right now we have about a 40% design package that's been submitted. So that lays out the roadway alignments, a little, kind of the major features. Basically, it gives us what the footprint of the project will look like. And so we look at that that footprint and compare it to all the different environmental items that we need to look at. So that could be wetlands, it could be noise, threatened endangered species. There's whole, maybe close to 20 different environmental issues that we look at. And so we really need to know what that project footprint is, know the limits of construction so that we can analyze that against the environmental challenges that we would have.
And so all that final design work, you can't move that ahead until you've got the environmental. It is an order of events that one has to precede the other. Then.
Correct. Yeah, we can move forward to a certain point, but we want to just be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, making sure that anything that we move forward in, we won't have to come back. You know, if something comes out of the environmental document, we don't want to repeat any design work, or at least minimize anything that we can. So it's kind of a balancing act a little bit. There is some guidance on doing some final design work during the preliminary design phase, and we're just kind of balancing that as we go. We're trying to hit that 2026 construction date. I think as we move along and pushing this environmental document a little bit later than we were hoping, it gets to be a little bit more critical in analyzing all the tasks that we need to do in order to move that along and avoid any interest charges that would be created with an extension of that construction start date.
Okay, all right. Any other questions for Chris on this project? Yeah, well, Chris, we appreciate you staying on with it, not trying to drive the negotiating price up here, but we're really glad we were able to keep you involved in this project.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Next item is a report and an update on the Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone. While Mark Messenger from FHU is here to give us that update, I wanted to make a few comments. At the last board meeting, this body, at my request to keep the study moving, asked the board to consider a motion to authorize President and the Executive Director to sign a third-party agreement based on approval by form by the Rtsd attorney. I'm, I guess, disheartened or disappointed, frustrated. At this point, we still have not received a third-party agreement from BNSF and OPPD. My last communications with BNSF is that document was going back and forth. They were trying to do one engineering agreement that would cover both railroads with the RTSD to be able to get to a diagnostic meeting. And we're not there. In order to try to keep things moving, at least ahead a bit, even though it's not going to be final, I worked with FHU, and today they are going to present the alternatives that they would call preferred at each crossing that would be required to create the quiet zone, and they have some cost estimates based on the best information we have from the railroads and FRA's inventory sheets. I would tell you, I am a bit anxious about that. I think you're going to probably hear a number that is lower than what some of us have talked about being. But they will go through that. But until we can actually get a diagnostic meeting with the railroads in the field to confirm exactly what equipment is there and what equipment is not, and what they would accept or not accept in the construction, the numbers that we have just aren't going to be accurate enough, I think, to try to move ahead for projecting a budget or to make that decision. So I apologize for that. I'll continue to work with the railroads and try to get that information here. Mark will go through here. We have made some progress and a lot of work has been done. I think they've come up with what they think are the better solutions if in fact a quiet zone was to move ahead. So Mark, you can have that, and I think just, I don't know how. Okay, all right.
All right, well, thank you, Roger. Again, my name is Mark Meisinger, Felsberg, Colton, Olevig. As Roger mentioned, we've been working on this Southeast Lincoln Quiet Zone project and putting together some alternatives and cost estimates for those, and have some of that information to present. As Roger mentioned, there was kind of two paths we could take here. We could look at what was out there based on the our inventory and the FRA database and go with that, or we could throw all kinds of costs at it that we're not sure if those are accurate or not, with things that might need to be added. So we chose the path of taking what was in the inventory and from the best information that we have available. And as Roger mentioned, once we have a diagnostic review, those numbers will get a little more solidified. So if you remember at the previous board meeting, there's 14 crossings on this project, from Calvert Street on the northwest to Yankee Hill Road on the southeast, and I'll go through kind of from northwest to southeast and go through these and show you just one, which would be a preferred alternative for each of those crossings. We did look at several different what's called supplementary safety measures at each, and rather than show you, I think there was like 36 different pages, we'll keep it here to 14. So the first here is at Calvert Street, and this is adjacent to the AGP elevator. And what we've identified as the preferred solution here is privatization of the crossing. As you can see, there's 5 different tracks that cross Calvert Street. The elevator is here to the north, and we looked at trying to put in raised medians, but it really wasn't feasible to the east side. There's really nowhere to put the median, and there's a large turning track for semis that come through here to load and unload grain. We also looked at some other options such as Wayside Horns, but from a cost standpoint, this conversion to private is the most cost effective. It would cost about $1,000, and that's for signage and to go through some paperwork process. We're currently in talks with AGP. I think we have another meeting with them tentatively scheduled for Friday of this week to talk about that option. Obviously, if Calvert Street is a city street now, they'd have to take over, AGP would have to take over some maintenance of that street, pretty much from this intersection to the east. And I can stop if you have any questions on each one of these as we go through. I can stop and try to answer questions as we go.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm just waiting for our chair. May I?
Oh,
May I? Sure. Can they decline to privatize it, to make it private?
Yes.
Okay.
If they would rather have it remain as a city right of way, there's some other options we could look at. Probably the most Cost effective after that would be to install what's called this Wayside Horn system.
Okay.
Just off the top of my head, I have the number, but it's more like $400,000 compared to $1,000. At least the RTSD and city costs. So that's kind of why we're trying to investigate that option first.
Could the railroad also say, no, we want the horn system installed here?
I don't believe that the railroad would take that position. Generally, they're not in favor of wayside horns. It's just not something that they prefer. The reason that cost would be higher here is today there's no gate arms or bells and lights, so that would have to be added to this crossing, and generally they want to have that. The main line is this line here that's on the west, but generally they want to have protection for all of the crossings, even though they're very low speed sighting tracks. So all of that would have to get worked out if we were to do something other than this private crossing option.
Thank you.
You bet. So as I mentioned, we'll be in contact with AGP and continue talking about that option and seeing what at least initially they're not opposed to it. Okay, so then the next crossing, I'll try to. Yeah, we could maybe see.
You're almost there. Oh, that's smaller.
If
Is that
that's
in
not
between?
large enough, let me know.
There you,
That's,
maybe an in-between size.
Okay,
Okay,
a little better.
better. Mhm.
that gives us a shot at it.
Yeah, generally on these drawings, the bottom is kind of the same and the top is, so this is Pioneers. As you can see, Highway 2 is adjacent to it. And the preferred alternative here is a raised median. In order to put in a raised median, it has to be a minimum of 60 feet in length. So that would require us to extend the median about 8 feet towards the highway to the east. And then we would, on the other side, we would have a barrier curb that we would install for just over 100 feet. That prevents folks that are waiting here from jumping the curb and trying to drive around the crossing on the wrong side of the road. Again, this one, it has gates, lights, and bells. So really all we'd be doing is this installation of the curb in the median. You will see there's a siding track here that's been removed, so that's not that's why we're extending that median up and over that today. It doesn't actually exist, but it's still on our drawing.
And the
Yeah.
cost, the cost is,
Sure. Yeah, I'll go back and forth. So again, that first one was about just under $1,000. This one was about $80,000.
it's just all cement work in effect.
It's concrete work, and then part of that cost for this one to install what's called constant warning time. On any of these, to enable the train horn to be turned off, they have to have what's called constant warning time at the crossing, and that is the amount of time that between when the train comes and the gate arms go down. And so they want it to be a constant time depending on, it's not dependent on, the distance, it's dependent on the speed of the train. So it's always like the same amount of time when the gate arm goes down and then the train comes through.
Okay, was that your question, then, Jen?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, generally the costs on that are for the median and then the constant warning time. And again, that would be an item that we would, when we have the diagnostic review, they'd open up the bungalow and look at all their circuitry and, for sure determine that, yes, there is not currently constant warning time here. Okay, so then we'll go on the next crossing. And this is 14th Street. Again, Highway 2 is right to the north of the crossing. This is the crossing next to the state penitentiary. Again, on this, our preferred alternative would be to install a raised median. We'd be extending that median again so we can provide the minimum distance required, and that's 60 feet from the gate arm up to the north. The one thing that we've done here is we've checked to see if semis and trucks can make this turning radius, and so that's, you know, part of that design. We try to extend that median as far as we can to enable that minimum distance. We would also have these curbs, and on the south side it's pretty much set up. You just have to put in this curb. And so again, you know, the costs on this are about $80,000. It's kind of a similar project to the Pioneers, where we'd be installing the medians and constant warning time.
Okay.
And the next crossing is, oh, I should pause if you have a question. You know.
I think we're good.
Okay. Southwood. Again, raised median option here. The distance up to Highway 2 is a little bit farther at this location, but we do have some other drives that we have to have a minimum of 60 feet between the crossing and the drive. So we're extending and building a new median here in the middle of the roadway, and then we would widen to the east, at least preliminarily. That's what we've identified. That would require some new crossing panels for sidewalk, and we're just putting in new sidewalk to kind of clean it up. And a lot of times when you come into the construction project, vehicles are parked and they break up sidewalks. We're just replacing all of that. This is the location, if you're familiar with the pickleball courts, are right here to the south of the crossing.
One of the most important crossings in Lincoln.
So again, this one, it would require constant warning time to be installed. And with that additional pavement, we're showing about $180,000 at this crossing. Again, widening to the east.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Widening to the east requires acquisition of private property or just right-of-way?
Shouldn't be any acquisition.
Oh, okay.
There is, we're showing a little bit of modifications here on this. There's a parking lot up here that we would propose to rebuild, kind of the south return to their driveway. I don't believe, though, that would require any kind of acquisitions.
So you're just matching the driveway up with the highway divider, or the raised median?
Yeah,
Okay.
and trying to clean it up a little bit there so that's not, there's a little bit of distance there that it would extend so people don't come and hit it, is why we'd be doing that.
Makes sense.
So, the intent would be to make them whole at the end of the day. You'd probably have to have a temporary construction easement in there to do that work. But I don't believe we would take, any property from that property owner.
Very good.
Okay, so the next crossing is 27th Street. Again, we're a little bit farther from Highway 2 here, and try to get that off the screen. The raised median would be our preferred alternative here. This one is really pretty much set up for it. The only thing that we would have to do is come in and install what's called a barrier curb on the island. They require an 8-inch non-traversable curve, so you can't just jump it with your vehicle as you're sitting there. This is a location, according to the FRA database, that has constant warning time today. So our costs don't include that. So our costs here are about $25,000. as we mentioned, if we come out with a diagnostic meeting and determine that either it's not active or it's not there, then that would increase the cost on this option. It'd probably be more, in the range of $100,000 if that would have to be hooked up or installed. So what we did on these is we tried to find the least cost alternative, if we could, on these different crossings, is to try to keep the total project cost down.
But we just don't, James, go ahead and then I'll follow.
So thank you, President Vest. I have a question about that. So you mentioned that you try to find the least cost option. I think my question is, are there things that we're aware of that Burlington Northern may ask for with items or equipment that could change these numbers since that meeting has not happened?
Yeah, so a lot of times if they're going to put in constant warning time, sometimes they'll require you to put in a new bungalow, which is the little kind of silver hut that's on the side of the road. And that's about an $80,000 cost item. So usually we try to come in and just say, hey, we want to put in the lowest cost or the least amount of improvements that we can. But the railroad sometimes will require those items to be installed. And then sometimes, on that Southwood crossing, we showed pedestrian crossing panels there. We've seen in the past where they say, well, we want to redo the entire surface of the crossing. So not just the pedestrian panels, but the adjacent street crossing panels too.
Cool. So what I'm hearing you say is that these numbers are the lowest possible cost, and realistically the cost will probably be higher based on what the railroad is saying is needed for their safety and their measurements. So the number that's being projected right now is the lowest possible cost.
Correct.
But maybe not the realistic cost, because they're going to have different things that they were going to want added in or changed.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I'd say, in looking at this, you probably could bracket it, this being the low at 1.3 and maybe up to 2.3, another $1 million, depending on, we just don't know what they would require. And generally we're trying not to, how do I want to say this? At this stage, we don't want to offer up these things because it'd be something that the Rtsd and the city would have to pay for.
Right.
So generally we're trying to see what they come up with in the meeting and not volunteer additional costs on your behalf.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Good clarification. Yeah, Jane.
And I know we had discussed about population zones and how it circulates. I think so far these 5 are not really so close to residential, but more commercial areas. So I guess if we do establish a quiet zone, can we pick and choose? Say like, well, on the Calvert Street, there's no homes near there. They can blow their horn. Or at Pioneers,
You can. There's some minimum requirements with the quiet zone regulations.
That's right.
So you can't, you couldn't say, well, we don't want to do anything at Calvert. Might not be a good example. You wouldn't say, hey, I want to improve Pioneers, skip 14th Street and do Southwood. Usually you want them to be kind of in a row. What you might do, depending on our meeting and the costs that come out of it, you could say, well, we want to do, from, just for instance, 56th Street south. Then you'd have a quiet zone in that segment, and then everything else you wouldn't. And so you'd still be blowing the horn on the, the northern or northwest area, but not on that other southeast area. You could do that. And that's the kind of things, once we identify exactly what the improvements would be, we can come to some recommendations and have a little bit better idea for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Great.
But you probably wouldn't do like every other one. It doesn't really work that way. It kind of have to be in a row.
Okay. Let's move.
All right, so continuing. This is 33rd Court, 33rd Street by Russ's over here, and it is private already, so really nothing other than just adding a sign here. See, and that was, again, like $900. Really no changes at that particular location. 40th Street. This one, we've identified, again, a raised median option. I'll call your attention on this, that the way that the medians are set up today, there's a pocket for southbound left turn lane that goes through the railroad crossing. And we would recommend rebuilding that so that you can't actually get into that turn lane until after you clear the crossing, just so you don't potentially catch a car that's sitting there waiting and, on the crossing when the gate arms come down. So with this, we, again, with rebuilding these medians to have barrier curb. And that one is about $66,000. That's another one that in the inventory it says it has constant warning time. It's not entirely clear if it's actually out there or not. So that'd be another item that would be checked when we had the diagnostic review meeting. So if you had constant warning time, again, you could potentially have additional costs up to, maybe $140,000 with this option.
A lot of uncertainty at this stage.
Yeah, we're kind of waiting on that diagnostic meeting to identify some of this stuff. The next crossing is 48th Street. This is one I did want to show you. We tried to look at to see if we could get a raised median in here. And Highway 2 is very close to the crossing. So there's really not enough room to do that. We can only get about a 50-foot distance there, and we need a minimum of 60. So we say on here, not feasible. I did just want to show you that we tried to make it work, and it's not going to work. So the one that is the preferred is a Wayside Horn option. And for this, really, the only thing that we'd be doing is putting in these horns at the crossing location. This one does not have constant warning time, and so that would add some costs. They would likely require you to do some sort of wiring up to the bungalow and have a new bungalow to install the system. We recognize that the city of Lincoln, currently operates the one that's on 35th and Cornhusker, or 35th and Adams. They've had some, I don't know if I'd say struggles with it, Roger, but they're not necessarily 100% happy with that as an option. But from the options that we had here, this is probably the most cost effective at about $270,000. We had a 4-quadrant gate option here that we looked at, and I think it was closer to $1 million. So that's why we went with this as our preferred alternative. So again, these are installed in several locations across the state, and they do work. It's just that I just wanted to address that, the city is the one that operates this, and so they'd be responsible for that.
And if there's any confusion, the railroad will begin sounding the horns, because if there's any uncertainty on their part, they'll sound. And we've been through this, and it's sometimes communication breaks down in ways that you don't anticipate. So maybe it's just a learning process. Maybe we're getting smoother.
So they have a confirmation signal that's out there. It's that red X that you'll see on the side of the road that'll blink. And as the locomotive approaches, they see that and they know that it's working, so they don't blow the horn. But if it's not on, then yes, they would sound the horn. They can always sound the horn if they see something on the tracks or they feel like there's a imminent danger. But yeah, that would be something that the city would need to participate in this, and currently they would be operating that. Okay. Next crossing is at Nebco. It's the concrete plant. Again, this is a private crossing, so really not much here other than installing. And I should say the sign just says it's private crossing, private drive, not a through street. Uh, 56 and Old Cheney. This is a location where the previous crossings were BNSF runs those crossings, and this one is actually operated by OPPD. And these from 56 and Old Cheney to the southeast all, we believe, have constant warning time installed when they came a few years ago and did their improvement projects to reopen the rail line. This one has had some, a few modifications here when that project occurred. And so they came back and installed some gates and lights and bells, some new equipment. So really the only thing that we would be doing here for the raised median option is to install these barrier curbs. We would expect on a diagnostic meeting that there'd be some scrutiny on this crossing to see if there's other things that need to be done. There are some pedestrian crossings here that are technically uncontrolled, if you will. And so we would expect that there'd be some, quite a bit of effort and discussion on this crossing to see if there'd be anything else that they would need to, require. A lot of times the road authority, which in this case is the city of Lincoln, has authority on the improvements that they want to install. And so our philosophy on this one was, well, we went through this process, that's been operating this way, and so felt like this is a appropriate configuration for this crossing. Now we're trying to add what we need to get the quiet zone installed. Again, this one about $45,000. That's assuming that constant warning time is there and operational. Questions on this one?
Nope, I don't see any.
Okay. So this is Pine Lake. Again, on this one, this is a newer crossing and it's pretty much set up for a quiet zone. There's medians here that are there today. One thing here, since the speed limit here is 45, generally in those other crossings where we were recommending installing barrier curb, the railroad doesn't like to have that at when the speed limit is above 45. So we wouldn't anticipate any improvements necessary here. And that would be something at a diagnostic meeting we would expect them to look at that and see if there's anything that, if it's some delineator posts or something here, we might expect to see a little bit of cost side added to this, but at least for now, we're not showing anything. You need me to wait for Mr. Vest, or should I continue?
Just go ahead and continue.
Okay.
Well, I do have a question. So at Pine Lake, does it already have the constant warning timing?
Yeah, so the inventory shows from 56 and Old Cheney, everything else to the east
Okay,
has constant warning time.
got it, thank you.
Again, when we have our diagnostic meeting, we would open up the bungalow, have the railroad check that for us and confirm it, and that'd be part of our meeting minutes, and so then it's for sure at that time since they're reporting it. Okay. South 70th Street. This is a crossing that's actually in the county jurisdiction. This is one of the highest cost locations that we have because we're showing widening the road to install these raised medians. We would widen about both sides, so right down the center. And we're showing installing sidewalk on both sides of the road. I believe there's a future trail connection plan, and we're trying to accommodate that with this improvement. We do show adding all new crossing panels here across the entirety of the roadway. And we'd expect, in addition to widening, we probably come and do some sort of overlay on this roadway so that it's all a constant surface. And so that's about $550,000. We do have, again, constant warning time at this location, at least is our assumption at this point. Okay. '84th Street, similar, where it's kind of set up for a quiet zone. There's existing medians out here. This location actually does have if you go out, there's delineator posts on top of the median. I do want to bring to your attention, there's some private drives that are here to the south. Usually, we try to push driveways a minimum 60 feet away from the crossing arm. But since they're residential driveways, they don't necessarily have to abide by that if it just serves one or two homes.
So is that still city, or is that moved into the county then?
I believe this is in the city.
Still city?
70th Street's in the county, but this is in the city.
Oh.
And again, this one, there's a similar setup down on 3rd and D for the quiet zone that's down south of downtown here, where there's some residential driveways that are within that 100-foot area that have been exempted. So that'd be something that, again, we would address at the diagnostic meeting and make sure that that's, everybody's in agreement with that. So again, on that one, we don't show any cost, similar to Pine Lake. And so then the last one is Yankee Hill. Again, similar story. This is a brand new street and crossing. It's pretty much set up. It's got trail on one side and sidewalk on the other, and the medians. And so we wouldn't anticipate any improvements necessary at this location either. So then back to the cost estimate, we do have that third-party agreement in here, $50,000, and so the total is about $1.4 million. Again, with the caveat that those costs are likely to increase depending on the diagnostic meeting. Answer any questions if there are any. I do. I have it on my, I can just, Roger asked if I had noise contours, and I do have some of those. I can show those to you. What we did was we did an overlay of the train horn noise contour. So and this will be part of our report. The orange circle is 80 decibels, and the red is 90 or above. The requirement is 96 decibels at 100 feet from the crossing. So the train horn, at the crossing meets that threshold, but we're trying to show every parcel that's at least touched, and so we've got a count of all of those. So you can see down here on the bottom left, at least this is Calvert. There's 212 impacted with this 80 to 90, and 13 with this higher. And we identified the parcels that had a building on them. That's how we did this. So I have this for each crossing. I also have one that shows if you did put in a Wayside Horn, there's a smaller footprint because the sound is directed right at the crossing. Now we don't recommend this at all of the options, but we laid it out so you could see the difference. You can imagine if the train horn is turned off, then the number is 0. So, and I could go through and show these. I don't know if you want to see them all.
Do we have access to this report? I mean, is this something we could review in our own?
Yeah, I can provide this. We have a draft report that we've put together. We're kind of waiting for that diagnostic meeting, but go ahead, Ryan.
I was simply going to say, we take this information, try to get it on the web so people can look at it, but first and foremost, I'd send it to you electronically this afternoon so that all the board members have it and you can go through that, look at it.
Yeah, I think that's the best route.
Okay.
what are the top 2 locations that have the greatest density of population?
That's a great question.
Well, let's go through here and look. So, and again, I'll say this is by parcel.
Mm-hmm.
So some of these might be commercial, but
You don't have that information.
Yeah, I was just looking for residential.
well, Southwood Drive, the orange is 635.
That's what I was thinking. That's the one I hear.
The red is 33. 27th Street's 427.
Okay.
This is the private drive. This is 339.
Mhm.
448 at 40th Street. 338 at 48th. Nebco was 359. 382 at 56 and Old Cheney. 218 at Pine Lake.
How much?
190 at 70th.
Wait, could you say the last 2 again? I
Oh,
didn't
I'm
hear.
sorry.
Pine Lake was how many?
70.
Pine Lake is 218.
218. Okay.
Not as high as,
I thought, yeah.
70th is 190.
Hmm.
Now that has more, that probably has the highest of the red, which is 34. And again, I'll provide this so you can have it, but
Okay. That's interesting.
271 at 84th Street. And 224 at Yankee Hill. This has 66 in the red. I think that's the highest of the red
At Yankee Hill.
at Yankee Hill. Go back and look at Southwood.
Very good. Any questions? James, go ahead.
I have a question, but I'm not sure if this would be a good question for you or if this would be a good question for Roger. Can you help remind us how many trains use this track every day or every week?
In June, there were 40 trains. That's 1.3 per day. And when I say train, I'm talking just going through one direction, not down and back. So 40 trains. July had 54 trains. That's just under 1.8 per day. And August had 43, which is about 1.4. So certainly less than 2 trains a day on the average. And my numbers, I think, are pretty close. They could certainly be off a train or 2, but I've been tracking those. So
I think if you look at the inventory number, it would,
Go ahead, James.
if you said one in one direction, it'd be 2. If it went down and back, it'd actually be 2.
but I've been counting them down and back.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
so the 40 in June, that's 40. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 to get to 40. So I
Okay.
haven't been undercounting. Those aren't, 40 needs to be doubled. That's the actual number of times
Number of
that
times
a
a
train
train.
went through town one way or the other.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's just a one-way trip?
Yep.
Then my second question is, so this train line had remained inactive for a period of time. So my question is there a possibility that it could become inactive again? Do we have anything that's specified on how long this train line would remain active for? Do we know for sure that this is going to be active for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? Or do we just not know how long it'll remain
A good
open?
question. We have asked. Both BNSF and OPPD have been reluctant to give us the exact details of their contract. They have said it is an extended contract. And I tried to read between the lines. I'm guessing that that's at least a 4 to 6 year kind of commitment. But my understanding is, at any time, if they put a contract back out, it could change again. We went 17 years with OPPD providing, and that could change again. But we just don't know. That's really up to the companies.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions before we move on? We will be hearing more about this, obviously. I guess, Roger, the priority is to set up the diagnostic meeting, and if we're not making progress, we may want to call our friend Mr. Davis and see if he can.
I can do that, and I guess I do have at least a preliminary number, so I don't want board members shocked. At the last meeting, as I said, you'd authorized the president and I to sign that agreement. The preliminary numbers that I have right now are in the neighborhood of $45,000 to come to a meeting from the railroad, to have the railroad have an engineering firm come and represent them in a diagnostic meeting, and probably to review the quiet zone plans that we've put together. So that.
Are you looking for action here that you and I can approve that so we can move forward?
The
Is that-
board gave that action in the June meeting. I'm comfortable with that. I just brought up the number today. I wouldn't want us to sign a contract and then report that at the next meeting and have somebody say, whoa, wow, I never dreamed it was going to be that much. I'm going to have to bite my tongue when we sign that agreement. It seems like that's a significant or an exorbitant amount, but they will be sending folks out of Dallas, Fort Worth to come to the meeting. It'll be several days, plus doing some additional work. But short of doing that, we don't have accurate, exact numbers for you to make decisions. And if we refuse to do the diagnostic meeting, we just sit here in limbo, because without that, we are unable to move ahead. So I ask your patience. I know that a number of folks are continued to be very, very interested in moving this ahead, and Rick and I can try to push on the railroad and see if we can't get that agreement here and get the meeting done and set up, and go from there.
Well, I fully anticipate we can get that. I'm going out on a limb here because we can't control, but we can encourage this meeting to take place and get that done, and then that will get the final piece of information available. And that's important. We've got a lot of folks waiting on this, so we need to know. With that, we will move on to the next item of business. Let's see, we're on miscellaneous other railroad work.
Just a few updates and some quick information. The railroad did come in and put in new concrete crossing panels on Pioneers, not adjacent to Highway 2, but about half a mile west. They're just on the east side of Salt Creek on one of their lines. They also did some repair and replaced several crossing panels out on Coddington. BNSF has been, I think, fairly responsive when there's been issues of disrepair and getting in to fix them. Late notice, there will be a press release going out today. BNSF will close First and J tomorrow morning, starting at probably as early as 6:30 in the morning. It'll be closed all day. They're doing repairs and work coming out of the east end of the yard that requires that crossing to be closed. Just work that needs to be done. And so I did stop and talk to a couple of the neighbors that live just south of that crossing to let them know, and we would hope to have some variable message signs out this afternoon on both sides of the crossing so people know it'd be closed tomorrow. It's just one day.
Roger, what are the cross streets besides J? J and
J and G.
J and G. Great.
And then we have been advised that BNSF and their continued preventative maintenance and update of their crossings, starting in late September, early October, they intend to be improving, repairing, or replacing every crossing from Ashland all the way through Lincoln on that line. The city and I are hoping to meet with the roadmaster maybe Friday this week to get a better sense. You know, we'll have detours around, the city will help out with that, but it's a good news and a bad news. It's good news because they're continuing to take care of the crossings and make them smoother. It's bad news that it creates a certain amount of disruption for traffic. But I'm glad to see them doing that, so. And then I might just back up just 1 second and in reference to work around 70th Street, on South 70th Street, as we're looking at that quiet zone. Also talking with the county, the railroad, OPPD, that is a timber crossing. It is not in great shape, but with the quiet zone discussion going on, OPPD is in favor of replacing that crossing with new improved panels, and the city has a trail project headed that direction. So the city, parks, RTSD, and the railroads will continue to talk and coordinate and make sure no one goes out and does some work that would conflict with something else or waste money. So we'll keep working on that. But that, and I think maybe Mark had that partially right. 70th Street north of the railroad tracks is in the county, and 70th Street south of the railroad tracks is in the city. So we actually have county, city, and a railroad all there at one spot. It won't be long, I'm sure, till that is annexed in all the city. And with that comes probably the urbanization, trails, sidewalks, and other things to keep into consideration in that area. So, okay.
Very good.
All right.
We'll move on then to.
Are there
item-
any questions for any other railroad issues that anybody had any concerns on?
I think we're good. We'll move on to item number 9, Roger. 9A and B.
Okay. 9A, if you'll remember, the RTSD is a partner in an interlocal agreement with the city of Lincoln on their Lincoln on the Move sales tax initiative. And as such, a part of that requirement was the creation of an administrative committee made up of city and RTSD representatives to give direction to the RTSD. The RTSD is to receive 1.5% of the sales tax, and then that money comes to, and the interlocal says it's to be used for engineering on 33rd and Cornhusker. So the little spreadsheet that I've got up there, the city has done a good job. They've got an Excel spreadsheet. They started collecting money in October of 2019, and in December of last year, they transferred that top red number, $151,765.57 to the city, or to the RTSD. And it was used on 33rd and Cornhusker. We spent a little over $1 million last year, actually a little over $1.5 million. So that money all went to ongoing engineering. So far this year, the document that's attached says that they will transfer $227,294.15. I have an update on some interest that ups that couple hundred dollars. The committee that met continued to recommend that the RTSD use that sales tax money for continued engineering efforts on 33rd and Cornhusker, and that money would be transferred once a year to avoid additional paperwork. And that money through the end of our fiscal year, which was June 30th, has now been posted in late August. So I would anticipate the city is working on a proposal, and I will contact them requesting that money to be transferred. You know, it's not millions of dollars, but every dollar helps. And I would also say I'm encouraged the city spreadsheet goes out the full 6 years, and they are doing a good job, and they are posting numbers and sharing those with me on a monthly basis. So I think they're being very accountable, and we appreciate that. So that's all I had on that, Rick. There isn't any need for action on that. That's just an update.
Pretty straightforward. All right, we'll move on to item B. Bill is here with us this morning.
Good morning. My name is Bill Kudelek. I'm with Crosby Gunzel Law Firm. I've been asked to provide just a brief update on pending litigation involving the RTSD, and as reported a few meetings ago, a purported tort claim was submitted to the RTSD relating to a accident incurred by a citizen at the rail crossing near Kingberg Road and Northwest 12th Street. That accident occurred in early morning hours, August 21st, 2019. A tort claim was also submitted to the City of Lincoln. And since that time, the claim against the city was denied. The plaintiff did file a lawsuit against the city back in September of last year. And since our last meeting, the plaintiff also sought and obtained approval from the court to add the RTSD as a defendant. So the RTSD is a co-defendant in that case. We have outside counsel with the Wolf Snowden law firm who's representing the RTSD on this one. And on July 23rd, an answer denying the allegations of the complaint was filed. The parties are in the process of kind of the discovery phase of the litigation, exchanging information and documents relating to the allegations in the complaint as well as the answers. And counsel, and Roger and I have been involved with counsel in discussing that. I would expect that this process will extend for the next several weeks or even months before we have anything more significant. But certainly if something comes up, I will alert the board to that in its next meeting or prior, if appropriate. Any questions with respect to that update?
Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We appreciate the update. All right then, moving on. Item 10, Roger.
Item 10, the year gets away very quickly. Each year for the last several years, the RTSD has done a proclamation to validate U.S. Rail Safety Week. And again, this year I've got a draft. The proclamation is together. The proclamation is back in the offices, and if so approved today, would ask you guys to sign that. But quickly would read again, this is a proclamation of the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Railroad Transportation Safety District, U.S. Rail Safety Week, whereas the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County, Nebraska Railroad Transportation Safety District, the RTSD, recognizes the importance of railroad safety as across the United States a person or vehicle is hit by a train every 3 hours, and whereas in 2020, 877 people in the United States were killed or injured in vehicle train collisions, and another 1,099 people were killed or injured while walking on or around the railroad tracks, and whereas in 2020, 10 people in Nebraska were killed in those same vehicle train collisions. Another 7 were killed while walking around the railroad tracks. Operation Lifesaver is a non-profit public safety education and awareness organization dedicated to reducing collisions, fatalities, and injuries on the railroad tracks and at crossings. And whereas Operation Lifesaver Incorporated is collaborating with a coalition of safety advocates to promote railroad safety through the observance of U.S. Rail Safety Week during the week of September 20th through 26th, 2021. And whereas the RTSD was formed for the purposes of increasing public safety on railroad tracks and crossings throughout the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County. And whereas the RTSD is committed to educating our community about railroad safety, as many accidents on the railroad tracks and crossings are preventable, and therefore the RTSD supports the goals of Operation Lifesaver, Inc., as well as the City of Lincoln and Lancaster County, Nebraska. And whereas the Railroad Transportation Safety District encourages all residents of the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County to educate themselves on railroad safety practices. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of the Railroad Transportation Safety District does hereby proclaim the week of September 20 to 26, 2021 as U.S. Rail Safety Week.
Okay.
And as I said, I've also got a draft working with NDOT and the governor's office for the state to do that same proclamation as well. So I would answer any questions. One thing I would say, good news, while this says 877 people are killed, last year it was 1,113. The numbers have gone down. Hopefully that, and I think 24 people were killed in Nebraska. That went down to 10. So I think the education and the things that we're all trying to do are helping to improve that safety. So good job.
I would entertain a motion to honor this proclamation.
I so move that we honor this proclamation.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Maybe I should have said approve, but to adopt this proclamation. Please call the roll. Yes.
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 Motion carries 4-0. Communications correspondence, Roger?
Just a couple of letters from citizens about rail issues. Anything that I felt needed board action or whatnot, I have passed on. Otherwise, those are being filed. I would expect after today's meeting, we may see a pickup in some communications about the quiet zone and moving ahead, but we want to ensure people were trying to move ahead as quickly as we can. That's all I would have.
All right, very good. Number 12, non-agenda items. Any of the board members have a non-agenda item? If seeing none, I would open it to public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to make a comment at this time? I see no public comments. We'll close that. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
A motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes, we are adjourned.